everybody. Welcome to what I hope will be a really fun panel. What we thought we'd do today, rather than do something staged and canned, we thought that we would hold a no-holds-barred discussion, allowing anybody watching this particular session to ask any question they want about 1111, about e-commerce, about retail or e-tail in general. And so we've got some experts from WPP to help. Let me introduce you to your terrific panel. First, we have Katie Riggs-Smith, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Mindshare. And Katie, give us all a wave so we can say hello to you. Then we have Tim Devine, who is the Executive Innovation Director of AKQA and finds himself living in Queenstown, New Zealand. Lucky for you, Tim. We have Eric Postuma, who is the Chief Growth Officer of Aleph out of Singapore. And you've got me for your sins. My name is Rose Herceg. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of WPP ANZ in downtown Sydney, Australia. So as those questions come in, and feed them through live, let us know what you want to ask. We're just going to go no holds barred, no preparation, lots of very bright people on this call. And I'm going to start with you, Tim, because I can already see several questions coming through about the metaverse. Big announcement that came from Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, the head of Facebook, the founder of Facebook. And the question is this: how do you see the metaverse changing 1111 into the future?
Yeah, I don't think the metaverse is a new thing. I think the metaverse it's a confluence of a bunch of existing technologies, and it's almost like a set of technologies formed a startup on the way out of the trough of disillusionment in the Gartner hype cycle and became together something meaningful. And I think that the way that AR and VR, blockchain, NFTs come together and draw influence from online gaming to create really immersive online experiences. If that's not a big part of the future, then I'll be very surprised. Many companies are shifting into that, and I think it's going to be an exciting part of 1111 in the future.
Well, then that leads me to this question that's come in, and I'm going to give this one to you, Katie, because Tim's talked about experience. What can we learn from the overall customer experience and how brands can create cut-through based on the metaverse and based on 1111?
Oh, look, there's so much to learn from 1111. I think a few things that stand out is how we can create the fun and excitement and bring the joy back to the customer experience. I think we've gotten very price-driven, logistic, and what would be great is to bring that joy and the experience that they see in this festival, bring it over here to Australia. I love how they flipped the model from being a liquidation sale to actually a testing ground for creativity and innovation in products. I absolutely love that idea that this isn't about deep discounts. This is about creating hype and anticipation. And, I was talking to some of our team in China, telling me about pods that you can only buy each year in the 1111 festival, and that people wait a whole year to get the next round of them. And I just love that idea of creating that beautiful notion of what products can bring to our lives. And then the third thing is really linking online with the retail. And I know it started out as being something that was digital, but now making those two worlds combined, whether that's using live stream as the kind of conduit for that, that overall customer experience in both the digital and the real space, I think there's so much to take from that.
Katie, that's terrific. Now, Eric, I'm going to give this next question to you because it really, really leads on what Katie was talking about. And the question is this: what do brands need to consider when creating products and services that are, in fact, digital first?
I think, okay, that's a really good question. And I think the big differentiation to make is designing for digital channels, which we all know and love. We need to be on mobile. You need to be able to buy on mobile. You need to be able to buy on social media, all of that, versus designing and creating for a digitally native consumer. We were just looking at some research from 2010, which is about a year after the App Store launched. And the research at that time showed that only 10% of cell phone users would pay for an app, right? Whereas today we all spend money on mobile apps, whether we buy mobile apps or whether we spend money through mobile apps. And maybe at that time, what we didn't see was how that small percentage was incredibly fanatical about the apps that they actually bought. Once you start paying for an app, it never stopped. It actually grew. So two things to keep in mind when you're creating these products or services. One is data-driven ideation. Where are the fanatical super users? What are they doing? And then use that as inspiration to create prototypes to show the rest of the users. Which then brings me to the thinking, where do we see this super user behavior today, right? Our kids are spending more on Roblox than actual real world products. Is this a new behavior? Is that going to go away? I don't know. Tim mentioned NFTs. Only 10% of the world holds cryptocurrency. 0.1 holds NFTs. But those people are super users. They're incredibly fanatical. So transformation is really a buzzword around digital channels, making sure you can sell everywhere. But the thing that we'd add on top is, what is the digital native consumer really doing, and to really think about that. Yeah.
Eric, thank you so much for that. Tim, I'm going to give this next question to you because it's all about pricing. And obviously I'm getting several questions about pricing and money, what things are costing for Double 11 and in general. Now, algorithmic pricing will become a much bigger factor in online sales in general. The question is this: what are the watch-outs and considerations we should be making when it comes to pricing?
I think algorithmic pricing puts consumers in a position where they're either aware of it or not aware of it, and they can create a psychological impact on the experience. If we're creating experiences, if it's an experience-driven economy, then I think it's important that we make it really clear about how we're creating these, we're pricing the products that we're selling. And I think that we've seen a few examples of ways that hasn't worked out in the past, and people have ended up paying for more. And I just think that transparency is going to be a big part of the future, and that'll eat into the idea of algorithmic pricing.
Well, we all like a bit of transparency because everybody wants to know what they're paying for and whether they can get the best bargain in the universe. So thanks for that, Tim. Katie, this is a question that we always get when we do these panels, and I think it's really interesting. Obviously, we've got Eric in Singapore, you in Sydney, we've got Tim in Queenstown in New Zealand. I'm in Sydney as well, and this is the question. Are consumers the same the world over, and do the same trends apply to all consumers everywhere? This is a big question, Katie.
The answer. No, I think that what is interesting is I think the big things people care about right now, the good growth of the world, the green, the ability for sustainability and supporting local businesses is all coming to the fore this year in the Double 11 Festival. And it's really lovely to see some of the ways that they're supporting those initiatives and putting so much behind it. And I think they are trends that people care about the world over. I think what's interesting is when you start to look at how the shopping trends translate into different markets. Those things will be universal, that idea of creating hype, the need for something, the anticipation of something, but how you land it in your market will be nuanced. So I think what's interesting is I've enjoyed seeing some of the LVMH brands on social here in Australia talking about the Double 11 Festival in a way that talks about time, indulgent. I'm paraphrasing right now, but it's time to treat yourself type of notion. I think they've handled that really well. You've got to make sure that you turn up in a way that's authentic to your market and to your consumer trends. So while some of the bigger trends the world over are the same, how you land it needs to be really authentic, or else I think people will just call you out on it.
That's great advice. So Katie said how you land it in your local market is key. Speaking of markets, Eric, it's interesting to me that we've got a lot of people who are watching who work in banking or in finance. And I guess their question is one about how they use Double 11. So the question is, how can banks or fintechs in general take advantage of Double 11 because they're not what you would consider as traditional retail or fashion businesses?
I think that's a great question, and really speaks to the time right now where 1111 used to start as really e-commerce for the consumer play, and it's really broadened to this day. That everyone uses around commerce and purchasing, etc. And it's one of those days where there's a real heightened awareness, and everyone's just looking out for something, whether it's consumer or whether you lead an SME. So we feel it's a great time for a bank or a fintech to showcase to the user not just the end product that we're trying to sell, whether it's a loan or a credit card, but really what it would be like to be a long-term customer of that bank or fintech. So for example, one-tap purchase. Are there certain products that you as a bank or fintech have that you can purchase with one tap? Because the consumer is in this mindset, kind of e-commerce mindset. I'm going to buy my new shoes for the winter or for the summer. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that. Oh, hey, there's this bank here. Oh, it happens to be a loan, but that you're going to be compared to all the e-commerce purchases. So if you can show to the consumer, we're on par with e-commerce. It's so simple. It's so easy to do business with us as a bank or fintech. Then that's a great opportunity to do so. And then I think the second thing to think about, or what we've seen, is yes, everyone talks about open finance and ecosystem and all of that, but what does that really mean? Now, an example of how a bank might do this is tie up with one of these marketplaces, the e-commerce marketplaces, share data, and on 1111. Have a combined product that combines a banking product like a SME loan based on the data of that SME selling items on that platform, right? So if I'm an SME on a platform selling items, they have all that data. Based on that data, I as a bank know, what type of product I'm able to offer for that user. So those are kind of the two main things we see banks or fintechs be able to take advantage of 1111.
Right. Well, Eric, I think I speak for everyone when I say if I could buy a loan the same way that I buy shoes, I would be delighted because, frankly, it's still pretty tricky, but that is certainly a challenge and some thinking, some great thoughts and thought starters that you give into all banks and fintechs. Tim, AKQA is on the cutting edge of a lot of burgeoning tech. We've heard NFTs being mentioned a couple of times already. There are a few questions in the feed that are all about NFTs, and here is the question that I'm going to give to you. When will they become mainstream, and how are they linked to the metaverse, and for that matter, to 1111?
Yeah, it's a great question. The reality is NFTs are something that are a result of the digital, our lives being part of a digital world, becoming mainstream. Like we value, as I do now, I'm doing this virtually with everyone here. We can see value, and there is true value in online experiences. So why not, tokenize or kind of formalize parts of that experience? And it's I guess it's the maturing of the digital world, and so it ties completely into the metaverse in that sense. And it's a maturing of that kind of like that social media kind of showing off and kind of being present, and but also kind of a respectful kind of consideration of what is meaningful about online experiences.
Well, I'm going to ponder the idea of maturity and social media in the same sentence because it's really interesting to me, but I really appreciate the insight, Tim. Katie, I've got a couple of questions in a bunch, and they're all about the fact that 1111, 11, however we want to call it, that it's such a big event. Is there a fear that it is so big that it becomes this big one-off? And I guess the question is really this: how do brands do something beyond the event? How do they keep it alive or get the same buzz ongoing?
Oh, look, I love that question, and actually something I must admit I've personally been pondering, and that's things I've been calling my teams around Asia, going, how do brands keep that ongoing cut through? And a lot of what people are talking to me about is just the data, like the absolute crux of it is how are you getting the data from that, and how are you going to use it for the next 12 months? How are you going to use that understanding of how people have engaged with your product, that they've had an immediate discussion with you? What are they putting in their cart? How are they showcasing their cart to their friends? All of those behaviors are the most rich insight into your audience in one moment in time, but they will live on for the next 12 months. They'll live on further. So how do you take that and continue on, rather than, I would say, in my mind, it should be the start of a conversation, not one moment in time and the end of a conversation. And what is really interesting to me as well is that I think it was Deborah Weinswig mentioned that in China, it takes 12 touch points to convert a Chinese consumer versus the West, where it only takes 4. Now, I don't think that means that we decide more quickly to buy a product. I actually think that means we're not as engaged. And I think that means we don't have as much of all of our channels talking together to create that hype and magic of this festival. And so again, it would be, how do you take all that rich insight into all of those data touch points that converted someone and keep it going further on?
That's a really good point, Katie. I want everyone to remember that soundbite. This is the beginning of the conversation, right? So 11.11 is the beginning of the conversation. I think that's really cool. Eric, I'm going to give this one to you because obviously you're in Singapore, you know, Katie and I are in Australia. We've got Tim in New Zealand. The question is all about the examples of brands who are doing or have done a great job using online marketing in Asia, who now might also have businesses in Australia and New Zealand. Can you think of any examples of brands that are doing a great job using this kind of marketing?
I think I'll cheat a little bit, and I'll use a Singapore brand who uses online marketing to target consumers based in Australia and New Zealand. And the one that comes to mind is actually Singapore Zoo here. And then they're doing what I think a couple things right. One is to that point that Katie and Rose, you were just mentioning, this is the beginning of the conversation. How do you communicate beyond the event? You know, what powers that is having a great marketing technology stack, which, you know, if I look at Singapore Zoo, they have installed and are using a great marketing technology stack to power that, and then have put in the software, the data-driven marketing team, the humans, the operations, to manage and maximize that technology through personalized and targeted communication. So that's kind of a real baseline. It's less about large campaigns. You know, 11.11 might be the first large campaigns, but then how do you extend that? It's more like, you know, hey, consumers or, you know, people of Australia and New Zealand, we know one day you'll visit Singapore. How can we stay in touch in a non-intrusive way? So when you come over, you'll come visit us. So I think baseline, you know, every brand needs that. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that's really interesting about what they're doing, if you look historically at, you know, any zoo, but in this example, Singapore Zoo, the majority of the revenue was ticket sales. And then, in store or in park kind of retail. But then, you know, Katie alluded to this earlier, there's this whole theme around sustainability and green that is really overwhelming. And a zoo has conservation at the core of their mission, right? So the zoo kind of looks back and says, okay, how can we use this mission, which is aligned with this massive macro trend that's not going to go away? And we've got all these in-park assets. How can we create content that people value? If people are spending, you know, money on Netflix and all these streaming services, and we're so used to valuing digital items like Tim mentioned around NFTs, can the zoo create content that people are willing to pay for, even if they don't visit the zoo? So it's you know, when we think about brands and how they use online marketing, it's not just about communications, it's about rethinking the assets that you have and how you can position it to that digital native consumer. Yeah.
I love that example of the zoo, Eric. I mean, I'm kind of terrified of every animal. So if I can look at it virtually, it feels like I've gone to the zoo and I've gone nowhere near a lion or anything that can basically eat me. So I love that example. I think it's a really, really good one. Now, you've touched on a word that we're like 19 minutes into this chat and we haven't talked much at all about sustainability. Now, 11 is obviously huge. What about the question of sustainability and the environment as e-commerce continues to grow? And actually, Katie, I'm going to get you to ask or answer this question first, because obviously sustainability is a big conversation, but 11 is one of the biggest consumer movements the world has ever seen. How do those two things go together?
I think that it's a great platform to start that conversation again with your audience around sustainability. But again, for me, it's very much you better be able to back up what you're saying. And so when you bring sustainability to the fore, you have to make sure that as a business you're living it, that you have the initiatives in place to deliver upon it, that you understand what sustainability means for the audience that you're talking to and what they care about. I think it is a big term that unless it's brought back into actionable steps for people, but can become just another thing that they hear thrown out to the world. And that's the last thing that we want right now. We want it to be tangible, and we want things to land that people can see the difference being made. So like I said, it's breaking down what you mean by sustainability, what role your brand is going to play in it, whether you're actually even talking about it or whether you're just doing something about it. I think those are two different things as well. And that will play out throughout the whole e-commerce platform and supply chain as you go through.
Terrific, right, everybody? Talking is great, but doing when it comes to sustainability is even better. Tim, this is a question that I think is really interesting because you've talked a lot about experience. 11/11, Double 11 it's a really fun festival. The question is this: shouldn't there be more joy in retail and commerce generally? Because transactions are quite efficient and boring, but where does the joy come into it when you're buying something?
Yeah, I think it's all about the way it's been for the most part in the history of things is scarcity is a kind of is an aspect of it, and the way that we kind of create novelty within those things. But as you know, I'm really excited about how we do kind of create more experiences, gaming experiences, exploring how we can create more experiences that are tapping into existing tropes. I think it's going to be exciting future.
All right, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for everybody listening. I mean, joy and fun, putting the fun back into the experience of shopping, of transacting, making it less about the do and more about the excitement of waiting to get whatever it is you purchased and the product arriving at your doorstep. So if you're watching and you're a brand marketer, let's think a lot about joy. Now, here's a question about live streaming. And Eric, I'm going to give this one to you. There's been a lot of talk about live streaming commerce in the last couple of years. It doesn't actually seem to have taken off much, but it does seem to be working with Chinese consumers. Is this something that will be a big thing outside of China? And why is it happening a lot in China but not much elsewhere?
I think it's great that you bring up live commerce after the joy question, because if you think about joy, live commerce is that kind of social buying experience together. And that's a way how joy has manifested itself in the digital world. So I think that's one way that joy kind of resonates. I think, look, we had the same question around the super app phenomenon years ago, when most of the West designed their digital product with a single-minded proposition, right? You had a Google Sheets app, you had a Google email app, you had a Google etc. app. And then China had this whole kind of design philosophy around the super app, combining all of these different things together. What we see now is that it's, that super app design direction has trickled into everything. We see it in the work that we do across most of our clients, whether it's banking or finance or retail. So I don't know where it's going to end up, whether that live commerce is going to resonate with the Western user, if you will. I will turn it back to one of the first things that I mentioned about look at what the super users are doing. It has maybe not taken off in a global scale, but in the local scale, some of the highest single day sales that happen are happening through live commerce. So the super users are incredibly engaged. And it would be a mistake to dismiss it as the rest of the world. In fact, maybe this is the time to really, ideate, embrace, prototype it, try it out even further until we find the own kind of Western product market fit. Yeah.
That's fantastic, Eric. Katie, I'm going to give you this next question, and then I'm going to get a final thought from each of our panelists as we wrap things up. But Katie, this is a question about the fact that the Australian shopping landscape is really ready to explode, right? Our country's opening up again post-COVID. We are all vaccinated. What stands out from 11/11 that you would like to see replicated in the Australian shopping landscape?
Eric, I would love to see live commerce replicated here. I just think it'd be a lot of fun to see the Australian version of live commerce, and also the things Australians would put into that chatbot when they're talking to a CEO or celebrity. I'm not sure would be allowed, but I would love to see that. But all jokes aside, I really would love to see the flip of the model. and it not to be our Boxing Day sale being the time that you can get down and dirty prices on. I would love to see us putting value behind the products and the excitement and testing and learning more. That was something that if we could bring that train of thought to Australia, I would be incredibly excited.
Well, Katie, I like that thought. I'm thinking as you're talking. As we round things out, I'm going to ask each of you one question. And the question is this, and I'll start with you, Tim, then I'll go to you, Eric, and then I'll finish with you, Katie. What's the one big piece of advice you can give to any brand marketer who is considering entering the world of Double 11 next year? Tim, I'll start off with you. One big piece of advice.
I would say keep it simple, make it really engaging, and really just think about. I think Katie mentioned it earlier. Experiment, play. That ties into that joy comment earlier. Is this idea of like experimentation, because it's not defined and it's a new thing, and I think it's that's what the future is. It's experimental. So do it.
Got it, Eric. What about you?
I think I'll jump off of that, from experiment to prototype. Take things, make it, show it to users. They don't know what they want sometimes until they actually see it. Talking about live commerce, do multiple versions of a localized live commerce, prototype it and test it, and then, launch it out in the market. Yeah.
Over to you, Katie.
And then to build on those, I'd say be realistic. If it's your first time in, there are some great stories about the billions and trillions of dollars being made by products, but I would just be there. I love the idea of play, prototype, and learn.
Love it. Guys, thank you so much. Let's thank Katie Briggs-Smith. We've got Eric here as well, Postuma, and of course, Tim Devine. Guys, we've loved chatting to you. Thank you for the questions. Go and spend up big on Double 11. I know that I will be doing that as well. I love a good sale. I love a good online sale. Take care. Stay safe. Goodbye.